So Bond 23 was going to be a celebration of 50 years of James Bond movies. It wouldn't be an adaptation of the novel Carte Blanche, which was a rumor for a while. I don't know if the films would ever adapt any of the newer James Bond novels. It just doesn't seem like something they're interested in, or would ever do. But who knows? The title Skyfall would intrigue fans and make them wonder, what does that title mean? Mendes hinted that the title would have an emotional meaning. That, along with the frosty font, would raise suspicions that the movie would have something to do with Bond's past, and the wintry demise of his parents. The brief synopsis they released also helped clue us in that the film wouldn't just be a routine mission for 007, and M would have a more pronounced role. Here's some useless trivia. Skyfall would be the first Bond film to begin with the letter S. But then the next Bond flick would take away that exclusive distinction of the S honor. It was also stated that Skyfall would be a standalone Bond film.
No, it doesn't. It's its own story. It doesn't connect with the last two movies other than these two characters in next to me.
Screenwriter John Logan confirmed Skyfall wouldn't be a sequel to Quantum of Solace and follow the story that had been laid out in the previous two Bond films. Nope. Skyfall would be all by itself and not have any connection to Craig's other Bond movies. It would have a beginning, middle, and end. Logan later tried to clarify his interpretation of Skyfall, saying, "I don't think these films are standalone. I think they're part of a legacy." To my ears, that still makes it sound like Skyfall was not a direct sequel to Quantum of Solace, only that it's another addition to the ongoing franchise and the history it has built. It sure didn't sound like we'd be picking up an hour after Quantum, much the same way as that film had done after Casino Royale. So if anything, it would have the loosest connections to Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. If any. The organization of Quantum wouldn't appear. Mr. White was unlikely to show up, even if they had planned to ice him at the end of that film, but drop that scene. He's still kicking around out there, but he's not showing up in Skyfall. So Skyfall was a blank canvas Bond adventure, like most of the films had been. If you wanted to say it's a sequel because it's the same actors playing a secret agent and his boss, then yeah, I guess call it a sequel if you want. But at the time, Skyfall would be something of a one-shot Bond adventure. There wasn't any weaving of this intricate tapestry of interconnected stories with Skyfall. It wouldn't be until SPECTRE came around when Skyfall would be retrofitted into a Craig continuity of films, and then tried to make it as one piece of a bigger picture. But that's for another time. Whew, another time. Once again, Craig's Bond doesn't get the signature gun barrel introduction. And I'm not sure why. I thought the whole reasoning behind no gun barrel in Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace was because the character wasn't yet the James Bond we all knew. I would have bet, okay, this time we're going to have the gun barrel in this third film. But nope. I read somewhere that Mendes wanted to include it, but for whatever reason thought it just didn't work with how this opening was designed. I'll go along with his decision. After all, he's the one directing this flick, but I think they could have made it work. Even had they opened things up with an iris and having Craig step into it. There. That didn't look too bad, did it? But no gun barrel opening for Skyfall. Bond is in Turkey on a mission, and we get the rough overview of what's going on. An agent is down. There's some kind of list that Bond has to get, and Emma's telling him it's very important. Very simple and clear. We're off and running. One thing this opening scene quickly establishes with the injured Agent Ronson, we see how callous M can be placing her agents' lives a distant second to the mission at hand. She's pretty cold telling Bond to just leave him and get after that list. Bond doesn't like it, but he obeys. This is the spot Bond will find himself in by the end of the pre-credits, when M is willing to sacrifice his life for a successful mission. She always said she wouldn't think twice about sending them to death.
If you think for one moment I don't have the balls to send a man out to die, your instincts are dead wrong. I've no compunction about sending you to your death.
I mean, we see that here. We meet another agent who is a complete mystery as to who she is. We get into some action, and all of it is really well done. Little car chase, gunplay, motorcycle chase, until getting to the train. The music really complements it all. A nice pulse-pounding score as we go back and forth between Bond on the train, Eve driving, and M back at HQ throughout this opening. In between all the excitement, it's apparent that Skyfall is going to try to incorporate a bit more of the humor that had been missing in the Bond films lately. Bond and Eve exchange a few little quips here and there. It tries to lighten things up a bit. Craig gets to do that suave straightening the cuff move, which is very cool. They should have tossed in a funny drunk guy reaction shot here. I don't think bringing out the humor of 007 is one of Craig's strong suits. He was the same way with Dalton. He wasn't exactly great at the quips. But I was kind of surprised how much I enjoyed Bond and Eve's interactions throughout Skyfall. These two establish a fun, relaxed relationship. They have some amusing, flirty banter between them. I began liking Naomi Harris's Eve pretty quickly. And I didn't know who she would turn out to be at all.
You know, there's lots of surprises, I will say that.
Speaking of Dalton, this motorcycle chase on top of the rooftops made me wonder if it was at all influenced by that idea for Dalton's aborted third film, of having a motorcycle chase on the Great Wall of China that I had read about. I mean, probably not, but I did make that connection when I saw this. It's a good chase, apart from a few CGI faces. They're not awful, but they are noticeable. The train sequence, I think, is the big signature action set piece in all of Skyfall. The film does have a lot of action, but most of it isn't as big and elaborate as this. It's clear this whole train scene took a lot of time to put together, and it pays off to a great Bond opening. I mean, it all looks great. Bond does that stupid action cliche of throwing his gun away when he runs out of bullets. Whenever I see that in movies, I always think it's such a pointless thing for a hero to do. We get that this is a visual cue to show the audience our hero is out of bullets, but realistically, he should hold on to that gun. Maybe he can find some ammo for it later. I would think it's better to have an empty gun than none at all when fighting a bad guy. As if carrying that empty gun with him will slow him down now or something. I mean, just put it back in the holster. But, you know, alright. We get some product placement here too. Along with the vehicles, we got a quick glimpse of Heineken. It'll get a more prominent shot later in the movie. There's the VW Beetles. Apparently, aside from the passengers, this train's cargo is a construction digger and 5 Volkswagens. Yeah, okay. At least they didn't toss in a Heineken train car pulling up the rear. I could ramble about the product placement sprinkled in Skyfall. We knew we were going to get them. The official 007 site even have their sponsors listed with links to them just in case you want to buy any of this stuff. They call them their partners there, though. I guess that's supposed to sound less like shilling products in their movie than calling them sponsors. Partners. This time I really didn't think the product placements were that distracting. Yeah, they were noticeable, but nowhere near as awkwardly incorporated as they could have been. Like that scene in Die Another Day, where it was essentially looking at a storefront window with everything all nicely displayed. I mean, that was so bad. The Caterpillar and VWs actually get incorporated into the scene for some stunts. Eve flat out tells us what these cars are.
What was that?
VW Beetles, I think.
But at least they get smashed up and are used for a thrilling moment. They're not just sitting there or having Bond hop in one to show off its luxurious interior. It kind of reminded me of that Omega watch exchange in Casino. They're showcasing these products, but also utilizing them within the scene. What's funny about that one was how it was spoken in a derogatory way by Vesper. It's kind of the same with these VWs. They're not just in the background, but get built into the chase by crashing off the train and Eve having to avoid them. Then Bond crushing them with the crane.
See this long row of junkers? It's not too tough a road for the famous Ford Bigfoot.
So I thought all the product placements were done in a subtle enough way that it wasn't very annoying. The worst offender of the product placements in Skyfall is that Heineken scene that comes later. It's such a flagrant shot, but even that one, it's kind of not used in a very glamorous way. We'll wait on that. So Bond is on the train and he gets into a cool fight with Patrice, struggling to grab that list. Patrice is wearing it like some kind of backstage pass at a concert for some reason. Things build up to the train arriving at the bridge. Nice suspense. Eve sets up her sights, and we get a nice tense scene of her being hesitant of shooting at them while Emma's barking at her.
There's a tunnel ahead. I'm gonna lose them.
Can you get into a better position?
Negative, there's no time.
I love the one little moment of M instructing her to fire, and Eve does that jolt and like holds back. I mean, Thomas Newman's score really adds so much to the scene.
Take the bloody shot.
Fires and then silence. Eve's murmur.
Agent down.
Very dramatic closing line to end the scene on. I like the sound of the rain back in London dissolving into the sound of the river too. It's a really good opening sequence. This was another long opening sequence, clocking in at around 13 minutes. It's nearly as long as The World Is Not Enough's. This one was much better though. More variety of stunts, locations, much better momentum. One thing I didn't get was how some people were talking about how this was the first time 007 got shot. I mean, well, he gets shot twice here. But he got shot way back in Thunderball. I mean, he was escaping and catches a bullet in the leg. I mean, he was doing the rumba a few minutes later, but he did get shot there. I mean, that counts. Adele's theme song. All I can say is, I like it. It's a bit of a throwback to the older Bond themes. It's much more traditional sounding than You Know My Name and Another Way to Die were.
This is the end.
The opening line of This Is the End always reminded me of The Doors' The End. I wonder how that song would work with this opening. Not too bad. The more I've listened to this song, the more I like it. It's haunting, has a nice melody. It also goes along nicely with Daniel Kleinman's credit sequence, which again is very mesmerizing. Surreal underwater imagery, going to Bond's bullet wound, graves back at his childhood home, skulls, floating targets, blood floating around, a wounded hero, dragons, and the required naked hot chicks. It's clear Kleinman had the script of Skyfall at hand when he was designing this, and attempted to use the imagery and symbolism to hint at the story to come. Something that I don't think MK12 had when they did the credits for Quantum of Solace. This looks beautiful. Once again, this is great stuff. Skyfall was off to a rousing start. So Bond is supposedly dead. Much like those old opening misdirections of Connery's movies, like making it look like 007 is pushing up daisies. Ever since The World Is Not Enough, they've really wanted to use Judi Dench in a more prominent role. Everyone loves Judi. So even though she's playing M, a role that has been typically relegated to sitting behind a desk, handing out a mission, sporadically popping up in a scene or two for some quick exposition, and then appearing a final time at the end of the movie looking for Bond, they've tried to expand M's role for Judi. Once the shock and surprise wore off that Bond's boss was now a woman in GoldenEye, M has taken to the field more and more, and the character wouldn't just bookend the movies. She's running around all over the place. Compared to Bernard Lee and Lou Brown's M, you feel like Judy's office is everywhere. Remember what a surprise it was to see M show up in License to Kill? That he actually traveled all that way to confront Bond about what he was doing? We knew this was serious and a big deal if M showed up like this. With Judi, she's all over the place. She's in cars, at funerals, visiting with friends, hanging out in castles, being taken prisoner. She's in the middle of the action, at crime scenes, getting lectured, running baths. M travels around just as much as Bond nowadays. I sometimes wonder if she's ever keeping track of her other agents. Maybe they just check in with her through Twitter. The funny thing is, the old office setting where M used to sit had become a real rarity for Judy's M. We'd see it a few times, but it didn't become such a memorable fixture in the series as the older M office. It wasn't very distinctive looking either. When I think of Judy's office, all I think of is the color tan. Plus it seemed like they'd redecorate and rearrange it throughout the Brosnan age. In Casino Royale it looked like that office design was going to carry over. But then in Quantum, a movie that was taking place a few hours after Casino, she had some completely new digs. I get they want to freshen things up every now and then, but a little consistency would have been nice. That might have been one of the reasons why the ending of Skyfall felt so comforting. We got to see that familiar old classic office again that had run through nearly 30 years. It's really the main consistent set that we get to revisit again and again through the films. Even when M would be out in the field working in some temporary space, they would make it look like his desk and familiar workspace were just lifted and plopped down there. The one in Golden Gun was very cool. The last time we saw it was in The Living Daylights. We only got to see Moneypenny's desk in License to Kill. In fact, the government's Universal Export cover was dropped somewhere between Dalton and Pierce. Oh yeah, we got a few references to it now and then, but M was no longer working out of a covert office in the middle of London. Secrecy was dumped, and she set up shop in the MI6 building. I mean, it's hard to trick people as to what kind of business is taking place there.
Prime Minister continues to express public support for MI6.
I'd like to begin the proceedings.
Your obituaries.
Unlike the American government, we prefer not to get our bad news from CNN.
With victims being evacuated to local hospitals.
Christ, I miss the Cold War.
I don't know what kind of place she was at in Quantum, but it sure doesn't look like a little export company that anyone can walk into off the street. The World Is Not Enough was really the first time they tried to give M a real prominent role in the story. I don't think that worked out very well. Then with Casino Royale, M would become more sympathetic to her agent. She'd still lecture him and be hard on him. If she didn't, their scenes wouldn't be much fun. But M would become more than just a paper pusher handing out his missions. She became something of a mother figure to Craig. So now Skyfall would basically revolve around M and Bond's past. The past is a big thing in Skyfall. This was probably an appealing thing to focus on for Babs and Mike with the big 5-0 anniversary. It allows for plenty of references to the past films, but it also will create a unique story for Bond and M. They decided this would be Judy's final performance as M, which supposedly upset her when she was told that. But they took advantage of her departure from the series by giving her a story of her own and a bang-up exit. Luckily, they didn't forget to include Bond into this, and explore the question of whether 007 is relevant, the toll this job takes on him, and how much longer can he do it for. GoldenEye offered up the question of whether Bond had a place in the post-Cold War world. Skyfall goes much deeper with that, and brings that question of Bond's relevancy to the forefront. You know, they got this whole old versus new theme that runs throughout Skyfall. Crops up in both blunt and subtle ways. Oh yeah, so M gets called in for a meeting with Ray Fiennes' Mallory, who is the chairman of the Intelligence and Security Committee. They're not happy M lost that list, and she's on the outs and is pressured to retire.
I know I can't do this job forever, but I'll be damned if I'm going to leave the department in worse shape than I found it.
You've had a great run. You should leave with dignity.
Oh, to hell with dignity. I'll leave when the job's done.
On her way back to MI6, the computers get hacked and an explosion happens in the building. A very well done scene. I'm assuming they must have used some kind of CGI effects here, and it all looks really good. Meanwhile, we learn that Bond is very much alive. He's living off the grid in some foreign country, doing lousy Heineken ads. It looks really silly. To me, this shot is the worst product placement offender in the movie. It kind of reminds me of that scene from Tomorrow Never Dies when Braz is sitting there and drinking Smirnoff. It's such a flagrant shot to show off one of the film's partners. I would have had Bond chugging some random hard liquor instead of a bottled beer. Bond always seems above that to me, even if he's a wreck. It is weird though. 007 is wounded, down in the dumps, popping pills, hiding out. It's the perfect predicament to top it off with a cool bottle of Heineken. I'll give them a little credit for not making it look fancy. It's not like I watch this scene and think, oh, I want to be like 007 and drink Heineken. It would have been worse had he ordered a Heineken in that Shanghai casino and they tried to make it look more appealing. I wonder if the Heineken company had any reservations with the context of how their beer is presented here. Probably not. More likely they were just jazzed they got it in a scene with Craig. They got back at him though, forcing him and Bernice to appear in that snazzy-looking Heineken commercial. I bet their partner much preferred that showcase for their product than this one. Another funny thing is we get that cliche of heroes hiding out all alone. They always hide out in some faraway country and do some nutty macho stuff in crummy places. I guess that's a way they try to keep a level of excitement and danger in their lives that they've grown accustomed to. Thanks to Wolf Blitzer, Bond learns MI6 has been attacked and heads back to London to M's apartment. She's all over the place in this movie. It's a cool scene as M doesn't seem the least bit surprised that he's still alive. Bond is a bit miffed that she didn't trust him to accomplish his mission, but M fervently defends her decision. Bond is ready to get back to work, but has to take some tests to ensure he's ready for duty.
I'll go home and change.
Well, we've sold your flat. Put your things into storage. Standard procedure on the death of an unmarried employee with no next of kin. Should have called.
I'll find a hotel.
Well, you're bloody well not sleeping here.
A little humor to close out the scene on. There wasn't that much levity last time Bond broke into M's house.
Don't ever break into my house again.
See, she's relaxing a bit with Bond. Boom, Bond is back in training at a new temporary MI6. Here again we get a bit of the past creeping into the story with this old underground bunker system. Also, Tanner mentions,
"We're still discovering tunnels dating back to the 18th century. Quite fascinating, if it wasn't for the rats."
Could be a bit of foreshadowing towards Silva and his little rat story. So for Craig's third outing as Bond, he's a physical wreck. When I watch these scenes of him all out of shape, struggling to hit the target, popping his pills, I sometimes feel a bit cheated. I've talked about the big third Bond films for the actors, and how Connery and Moore pretty much established their bonds with their third films, and made arguably their greatest Bond films with them. Braz didn't fare too good with his number 3. So now Craig gets his crack at his third. I'm not saying Skyfall is disappointing in any way. In fact, I think had Craig stopped here with his 4 films, his Bond legacy would be remembered for Casino Royale and Skyfall. But I sometimes think that Skyfall should have come later in his tenure. I mean, we just saw him earn his 00 status in Casino Royale. Quantum of Solace was something of a postscript movie concluding that story. So one could say we only saw one long Bond story from him that ended with him saying,
"I never left."
Okay, cool. Now, let's get on with the next one. Now he disappears, and age is catching up to him, and it's questionable whether he's able to do this anymore.
You know the rules of the game. You've been playing it long enough. We both have.
Maybe too long.
Skyfall isn't a direct sequel to Quantum in any way, so we can't be sure how much time has passed between the movies.
It's its own story. It doesn't connect with the last 2 movies.
But I feel we were robbed of seeing some other adventures from him before he reaches the point where he can barely do pull-ups anymore. It almost feels like they told this story too soon for Craig's Bond. Because of that Sony mess, years were ticking by, so Craig was aging while the cameras weren't rolling. And sure, being a 00 isn't something anyone can make a long career with. But I mean, already he's burnt out in his 3rd film? It would have been nice to have seen at least one other Bond film before they tackled this story. I still would really like to see one Bond movie from Craig that isn't personal. Just a straight up old school mission. Get a mission. Meet a bad guy he has no connection with. Bet a more regular Bond girl. Just one he'll shag and she won't leave any emotional impact on him in the future. The extent of their relationship will end at the closing credits after he saves the world. The end. I'm not sure if that's ever going to happen nowadays, though. Bond goes through physical and mental evaluations, and he's obviously a mess. The whole shrink scene is very good. Bond gives some amusing answers, and the mention of Skyfall tantalizes us as to its meaning.
Dance.
Murder.
Employment.
Country.
England.
Skyfall. Skyfall.
The whole word association thing does seem a bit beneath Bond, especially considering how well he is at reading people. But I mean, what the heck, it makes for a good scene. There's some light banter between Bond and Eve. This is all setting up her leaving the field for an office job working with Mallory. I was really surprised at how well their scenes play. Craig is such a cold, lone 007, to see him play a bit more levity was dicey. But I think he does pretty well. Plus, there's some pretty sharp dialogue in their scenes. Learning he's passed his tests, supposedly, Mallory confronts M and Bond about his reactivation as a 00.
It's a young man's game.
Look, you've been seriously injured. There's no shame in saying you've lost a step. The only shame would be not admitting it until it's too late.
Fiennes looks to be being set up as an antagonist that will just cause these two headaches. But after some slight doubt, he'll become an ally, and Bond gains some respect for him when he learns he was not always just a paper pusher. Skyfall drops in those Bond breadcrumbs that 007 follows and are used to progress the story. Clues that are found that help move Bond along. Sometimes they can be awkward and way too convenient to make it feel believable. But here, they're not bad. The first is the shrapnel from his gunshot wound. They easily ID Patrice from it and find out he's going to be in Shanghai. The one thing about this, and I don't know, maybe it's nitpicky, but I always thought it was strange that the information is out there where this bad guy's going to be, and it doesn't seem like anyone is interested in it. Wouldn't the CIA have wanted to do something with this intel before Tanner pulled it up? Maybe sent their own people over to get him? Like maybe the CIA would have tried to arrest the guy for something else he did long before he got into the spotlight at MI6. I don't know. Luckily, Bond is on the case, and he's going to follow him. We meet the new Q, played by Ben Whishaw. Again, very good scene. I keep repeating it, but he establishes his character very quickly and what kind of relationship that he and Bond will be having. There's some fun dialogue, and now with this youthful Q on the scene, it's one more thing that reinforces this whole old versus new theme that runs throughout the story. Along with that painting of that ship and their critiques of it.
Grand old warship being ignominiously hauled away for scrap. The inevitability of time, don't you think?
They're really driving the point home with this. It's a nice casting twist. We're so used to having Q be the cranky older uncle towards Bond. I mean, how many movies was he in? Like 17? So it's a nice freshened up take by making him an annoying, fussy, wise-ass younger brother. I much prefer Wishaw's casting than when they tried to make John Cleese Q. He was just John Cleese in a James Bond movie. It wasn't really anything special or looked like his casting was going to make Q and 007's relationship that interesting. His Q scenes were looking like they would just be a showcase for Cleese to do some of his sarcastic quips. I like Cleese, but I didn't think he was right for Q. And he was just such a predictable choice. I'm glad they dropped him. Wishaw looks like they can get much more mileage out of this Q, and plus have him be something different than Desmond's Q. The funny thing is, with Wishaw, he's only 12 years younger than Craig. I mean, it's not that huge of an age difference. So if they have him stick around, by the time they cast the next Bond, Q and 007 will be contemporaries. If he's around longer than that, he'll move into the older uncle role like Desmond was. This Bond and Q relationship has the opportunity to transform a bit as the series continues, and if they stick with him. Bond gets his gadgets, and I think all Bond fans knew the payoff to the signature gun as soon as we saw it in the trailer.
Author PPKS 9mm short. There's a microdermal sensors in the grip. It's been coded to your palm print so only you can fire it. Less of a random killing machine, more of a personal statement.
We've seen this thing before in License to Kill, and it's pretty much used the same way here.
Once I've programmed it... Now, nobody can use the gun but you.
I'm not sure what else you can do with it other than have Bond drop it, a bad guy tries to use it, and it doesn't work for him. There you go. It's pretty expected. I do like Q's line of it being a more personalized statement for a kill. The Shanghai scenes really start to show off how spectacular the movie looks by famed cinematographer Roger Deakins. I think it's the Shanghai, Macau, and Scotland sequences that are the real visual standouts of Skyfall. They all look great. A lot of fans have said that Skyfall is the most visually stunning Bond film ever, and you can make a great argument for that. this really looks like a luscious, big-budget movie. No boring, barren deserts here. After a quick swim, Bond gets Patrice's arrival time and follows him to a Shanghai building. Bond keeps his distance as Patrice kills a security guard. Not very nice. It's kind of strange that he just sits back and allows Patrice to go about his business and have his victims mount up. He could stop him at any point, but he doesn't. This is a bit annoying and nonsensical, but really, it didn't bother me all that much. Bond's mission is to get the list back, so perhaps he thinks by following Patrice, it's going to lead him to the list and answer who he's working for. So a nameless security guard getting iced is collateral damage to the mission. We're reminded Bond isn't too great at doing pull-ups anymore, as he hangs onto the bottom of the elevator. There's this one shot of how high up the elevator is going, and it kind of looks too sci-fi for me. It's like, I don't know, like way too exaggerated, or there's something that just looks unconvincing to me about it. But, whatever. Here's one of the first really cool, smaller-scale, thrilling action set pieces in Skyfall. I mean, in comparison to the big train scene. Bond follows Patrice into this high-rise as he executes this plan, which I don't know what it is. Apparently he's been hired to shoot a guy who's looking at a painting in another building. The first time I watched Skyfall, the bizarre nature of this contract he's carrying out didn't occur to me. I was too busy being dazzled by the cool layout of the floor and the groovy reflections and neon signs all around, the subsequent fight itself. Even the sound of the wind coming in through the hole that he drills in the window is a small, awesome touch I love. There's some really nice sound transitions and details throughout the movie. But yeah, like, what is going on? We know we have to have some suspension of disbelief with 007. Logic can be stretched an awful lot.
And I'll do anything for you.
But this one doesn't make a lot of sense to me as to why Severine would hire Patrice to kill the guy from another building, when she has all these baddies with her who could have easily done it. Maybe there's something to do with making the scene look like they were innocents who survived some kind of hit, and Bond just interrupted the latter steps of it. I mean, I'm not sure what else I can make of this. It could just be one of Silva's whacked-out plans that only makes sense to himself, and the movie isn't worried about making it logical or explaining it to us. Any theories? There apparently was a cut scene that was to have taken place earlier at Shanghai Airport, with Severine handing off a briefcase to Patrice. It was one of the first publicity images that was released from Skyfall. I'm guessing the suitcase had his rifle and payment for the job in there. I doubt he would have been able to check that suitcase into baggage nowadays and could have easily just picked it up at the baggage claim. So it would have played as Patrice gets off the plane, checks the time, makes his way to the meet near a Dunkin' Donuts or something. Bond spots Severine giving Patrice the suitcase and then follows him out to his cab where they head to the office building. This handoff would explain away a logistical problem with Patrice having his rifle, but really, who cares? Suspension of disbelief, remember? I know fans put some of the storytelling of Bond films under a high-powered microscope sometimes. Guilty. But this one is a pretty minor issue. I think it was smarter to drop this Severine escalator scene anyway. For one, it is a pretty non-issue. There are much worse leaps in its story the movie takes later than this one. Two, it would have slowed up the momentum of the entire sequence, and lastly, the image of Severine standing in the shattered window of the building across the way is a much more dramatic, memorable entrance for her into the story. She looks great. Oh, one other amusing little inadvertent repercussion from this deleted scene was screwing up that Heineken promotion with Bernice holding that briefcase. I imagine the briefcase would have been a bigger deal in Skyfall, getting more of a focus. So, what a great idea to use that in a publicity campaign. It kinda comes off pretty random now.
This case, you have to find a way to open it.
Their partner was probably pretty disappointed after having created this huge crack the code campaign around the idea of Bernice holding a briefcase, and then finding out that scene was completely cut out of the movie. She never even gets near a briefcase. No! There's reflections moving all around. You can analyze what all that represents if you want. Craig's 007 loves his mirror and reflections. Silva is meant to be an evil mirror image of Bond, like a fractured shadow reflection, so you can have plenty of fun looking into the deeper meaning of that stuff in Skyfall. It's even Bond's reflection that gives him away to Patrice. Or you can just say, this is just a cool looking scene. This immediately became one of my favorite fights in the Bond series. It's one extended fight scene, no cuts, silhouettes going at it, in front of the funky, bright jellyfish, flashes of the rifle firing. Newman's score that's been playing quietly throughout the whole build-up to this really kicks in. It's beautiful. Patrice is dead. Bond doesn't get the list back. He catches the eye of Severine and manages to get his next clue. A casino chip with the next signpost of where to go literally written on it. Macau. Meanwhile, M is playing with Photoshop and gets messaged that the first names on the all-important list is now on YouTube. Unfortunately, they don't show us what Silva's YouTube channel's name is. I would be curious what other stuff he has posted on there. Check out to see if he has any fun playlists and stuff. Probably after posting the list and the promise of 5 more names every week, he'd get a bump up in subscribers. Bond is in Macau, in one pretty amazing hotel room. I mean, what is this place? I mean, this looks like something out of The Last Emperor or something. Eve stops in and we get a bit more of that old versus new dialogue.
Cutthroat razor. How very traditional.
Well, I like to do some things the old-fashioned way.
Sometimes the old ways are the best.
Also another Craig reflection. This segues into another very good scene of Eve shaving Bond. A lot was made about the sexual tension between the two, and they continue to have that fun back and forth banter. I guess it might be fun to theorize whether Eve and Bond get it on or not. I don't think they ever do. That would just ruin their relationship in my mind. Craig finally loses his whiskers that he's been carrying around for most of the movie so far. They definitely make him look older. Also, his hair is cut much shorter than in Casino and Quantum, and that also makes him look older. It works in the context of this story, but he should grow it out more. Bond arrives at this Macau casino, and boy, do they show off how awesome it looks. This is a great cinematic Bond entrance, all lit with floating lanterns and fireworks, these giant dragon heads. This is another sequence where Deakins really left his imprint on Skyfall. It's really a unique looking locale and is one of the most memorable casinos out of all the Bond films. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. I don't think it actually exists though, it's only in Bond's world. These shots are some of the ones that quickly come to my mind when I think of Skyfall. I really enjoy Newman's score throughout this movie, although I have to say, this one musical cue reminded me of the opening of John Williams' Jurassic Park theme. It's like I hear the opening notes and expect to hear it. Right? Like, is it just me? Eve is already inside and we get a little callback to Casino Royale of him telling her not to touch her ear like that one dope did and called attention to himself. There's this uninterrupted shot of Bond strolling through the casino, talking to her through her earpiece. Mendes has a background in theater, and sometimes I wondered if that was at all an influence of him doing so many long takes in Skyfall. It's a real contrast to the quick cuts that permeated throughout Quantum of Solace. If this was that flick, it probably would have taken 50 shots to get Bond to walk into the casino door. I really like this walkthrough. It's relatively simple as Bond enters the casino, he talks to Eve as they both walk to the other end of the place. It shows off the joint, we actually get a chance to marvel at this set, it comes off very stylish. They also do another cool audio bit with Eve's voice. We hear her voice through Bond's earpiece the whole time, and when she walks close to him at the end, her voice loses the ambient sound of that earpiece.
I like a little flutter now and then. Who doesn't like to take chances?
I don't know, I love little touches like that. A lot was made about the opening of SPECTRE with that 4-minute unbroken shot and the pre-credit sequence. I'm actually more dazzled by the shorter ones in Skyfall. To me, they all play much cooler and less showy than that big opening one. We make our formal introduction to Severine. Hey, notice her bodyguard touches his ear? Bond is the only one who knows that's a no-no. Everyone must have an awful time trying to wear their Bluetooths in Bond's world. Bond cashes in Patrice's chip, picks up a suitcase full of loot. Severine never touches this suitcase either. Bond's famous introduction.
Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Hearing that made fans happy. There's a shaken martini, we like to see that. Craig got to avoid using the line and we just see what this bartender is making. We know immediately what he's about to drink. Craig probably was happy he just had to say perfect instead of ordering the actual drink.
Only a certain kind of woman wears a backless dress with a Beretta 70s strapped to her thigh.
One can never be too careful when handsome men in tuxedos carry walkthroughs.
Bernice Marlowe. She looks great in this scene. I've read her look was meant to invoke something of a vampy dragon lady, and it's hard not to make that connection. With her makeup, her nails, the cigarette. I'm actually kind of surprised they included that, by the way. I thought smoking became completely off limits in movies. I think the last cigarette we saw in a Bond movie was in License to Kill. Oh yeah, there was that one cigarette in Tomorrow Never Dies that Brosnan admonishes the bad guy for.
Filthy habit.
You can easily pick up on this dragon connection of Severine's character. It also helps this casino as giant floating dragon heads, along with some of the decorations around. Plus the Komodo dragons in that pit. We already have dragons on our mind when we walk into this joint. So when Severine shows up, she looks like an extension to this motif. You can run further with this dragon symbolism when she reveals her boat's name is the Chimera. Coincidence or not? The big sit-down between Bond and Severine is one of my favorite scenes in Skyfall. There's a lot of great scenes in Skyfall. I'm sounding repetitive, I know. But they happen pretty consistently. Usually people walk out of a Bond movie and remember the big action scenes. Those are the ones that typically leave the lasting impression. But I remember hearing from even casual Bond fans talking about this one scene after seeing Skyfall. It's really good, and both Craig and Marlowe are terrific here.
You put on a good show. But ever since we sat down, you haven't stopped looking at your bodyguards.
This is the type of scene that I envisioned Brosnan was dying to play when he complained about wanting to do more with the role. It's basically another breadcrumb moment, with Severine being the link for Bond to meet Silva. But their exchange also reveals some insight into Severine, and it really generated, for me at least, some genuine sympathy for Severine.
Tattoo on your wrist is MACHAU sex trade. You belong to one of the houses. What were you, 12? 13? I'm guessing he was your way out.
Bond still has that knack for being able to read people. He quickly dismisses Severine's warning and easily takes command. He has figured out that she's being kept by Silva, what her background is, and what her relationship is with him. Bond's observational abilities don't end with that not touching your earpiece thing. It's a very Sherlock Holmes kind of deduction thing. He doesn't even need to do any word association exercise to figure her out. It's kind of reminiscent of that scene from Casino Royale on the train when he first met Vesper. With this short exchange of us learning that Severine was part of MACHAU sex trade years ago, I immediately felt compassion for her. She becomes more than just a hot Bond girl, and is now someone I'm hoping Bond will really be able to save. Bernice's facial expressions help complement all this. It's like that mysterious, vampy facade we just met begins to crack away. It looks like she's trying to keep her cool and hide the fact she's terrified. Like, look how her hand trembles as she takes that drag. We've seen Bond girls like this before. They're on the arm of the villain, are kept women, they're abused or mistreated, and they're desperate to get away. They meet Bond and he becomes, hopefully, a way out for them. Just from this scene and her backstory, Severine jumps towards the top of the list of kept bad guy gals for me.
When I leave, they're going to kill you. If you survive, I'm on the Chimera. North Harbour. Berth 7. We cast off in an hour. Very nice to have met you, Mr. Bond. Good luck.
The scene ends with this great shot of Bond raising his glass to her bodyguards as if he's saying, "Okay, you guys ready to go at it?" The fight is okay. I don't think it's very special. That signature gun gets used in exactly the way we knew it would.
Good luck with that.
It's these Komodo dragons that just... I don't think they add any excitement to this. The music is pretty good during it, but I think I would have preferred just a straight fight with Bond against the bad guys without the dragons coming in. I mean, I'm sure these things are dangerous and I wouldn't want to be in a pit with them. You know, I'd probably freak out if I ever saw one in my bathtub. But how they're used here, it's not that thrilling. It just drags the guy into its cave. The CGI is not very convincing. This just looks out of place in the movie. Craig's Bond is just too serious for this campy kind of thing. You know what it's like? It's like that deleted scene from Daylights when Dalton was supposed to be riding a flying carpet. That's how awkward this looks. But instead of deleting this bit, they kept it in the movie. I would have rather seen Bond taking the bad guys out with some punching instead of the dragon coming in to the rescue. I think it's meant to be a homage to Live and Let Die, but nah, it doesn't really work.
Good luck out there in the field. And please return the equipment in one piece.